Hi everybody, Chef Coco here. Today I'm going to teach you how to make an amazing broccoli cauliflower soup. It's a pureed soup, so it's smooth and creamy. And you can use this recipe for a master recipe to create lots of different soups using this method. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to do is go through the ingredient list with you. We're going to first start with broccoli, and for this particular recipe we're going to make a half a gallon. So we have 2 crowns of broccoli, a head of cauliflower. We're going to use 1 onion, and you can use a sweet onion or a yellow onion or white onion. And we also are going to use some ginger. Now I'm using ginger paste because I buy it in a jar. You can use fresh ginger, or you can use a ginger powder, whichever you have and what you have on hand. We're also going to be using garlic in this recipe, so I'm using chopped garlic because it's easily available to me. And one thing about chopped garlic, if you do chop your own garlic and you store it, you want to cook it or put some acid in it before you put it in the refrigerator and put oil in it, because it could grow botulism, and so you don't want to do that. So you want to make sure that you add some sort of acid to it, or you cook it if you store it in oil. So we're going to use some that has some citric acid in it already, and this is great, very handy to have in a kitchen. So we're also going to use some salt. Today I'm going to use some pink Himalayan salt, but you could use regular salt. I'm going to use white pepper because it's going to be a white soup, a creamy soup, and I don't want the black specks in it. And we're also going to season it with some ground cumin. And then we will put some vegetable base. Now you can use chicken or any other type of base, but we're going to use chicken today, and I'll show you how to mix it with the water. And we also have some lime that we'll put in it at the end to finish. You can use a fresh lime, or you can use some lime concentrate juice, whichever you have. And then we'll garnish it with some roasted and salted pepitas, which are pumpkin seeds, on the top. So those are our ingredients. And now I'm going to show you how I make it. So the first thing we're going to do is we have to do our mise en place. And our mise en place just simply means put in place. So the first thing we'll do is cut our onion. The onion doesn't have to be in perfect pieces. It can be coarsely chopped. So how I do that is I grab the onion. You always want to grab the onion with your fingers. Have it like the claw. And I always tell my students, if you use the claw, you'll never cut your hand. So we're going to anchor the onion to the board. And we're going to cut the end. We'll flip it over, cut the end off. Now some places and some operations buy chopped onions. That's perfectly fine. However, if you have to peel your own onions, that's not a problem, particularly for this dish, because it can be any particular size. And if your onions are kind of soft, because sometimes at certain times of the year they get kind of mold around it, you want to wash that off. These look good. This is a Vidalia onion. That we're using here. If you smell it, it's nice and sweet. And we're going to cut it right in half, and then we're just going to cut it, keeping our fingers away from the blade. And this is just going to be a rough chop, so we'll just do it that way. This is the best way to chop an onion if you're just doing a rough chop. See how quick that was. The plate here, put that to the side. It's always a good idea to have all of your things chopped up and ready to go before you start. So I've washed this cauliflower head, and you can see this is a really good cauliflower head because it's really tight. There's no dark spots on it. When cauliflower is grown, I don't know if you know this or not, but these leaves, which you see cut off, are over it and they're tied, and that's why it's white. It doesn't really see the sun. So you just want to take these pieces off. I like to cut my cauliflower in half. Now, you can also break it up by hand if you want florets that look really kind of natural, and this is good if you're serving like raw on a vegetable tray, and you can break it down as much as you want with smaller pieces. You just pull it off and they'll come off piece by piece. Now, if you're doing a rough chop, which we will do here, you can just chop it and put it on your pan. So you could just chop like this. Just rough chop it because it's going to be cooked. Cauliflower gets really soft when it's cooked, so you don't have to worry about it. And these pieces, you can throw those in if you're going to puree it. Otherwise, you would take those out. So also, if you wanted to core your cauliflower, like if you're going to make cauliflower steaks, just want to put your knife in the corner, make a V to cut it. And trim the bottom part if it's got a big root. You can see here. Trim this part. So if you were making a steak with cauliflower, roasting it, you would cut it pretty thick. You can see it's still intact because the root is there, but you could save that and make a cauliflower steak out of it for a great meal, great dinner, vegetarian entree or vegetable. See, that one kind of fell apart, but that's okay. Move that there. And so how you would roast this is that you would brush it with olive oil on both sides, and you could put it on the grill, but you'd have to be very careful with it so it wouldn't fall apart. Or you could roast it in the oven at high heat, so it'd be about 400 degrees for about 30 minutes, and it would roast it. You would turn it halfway, and that would make a really nice entree for a vegetarian option. So I think we'll hold on to that and do something with it later. So now we have our cauliflower prepped. We'll do our broccoli. Now broccoli, I like to cut the stems off because I like to use the stems. And I just trim off the fibrous part of the broccoli stem. And you can use this part for stock if you make vegetable stock, or you could throw it away. And then you just want to trim with a potato peeler. And you'll see the fibrous part, and you just trim that off. And this whole stem is very tender, but first you have to get that outer layer off of it. Now, these can be chopped up and used. They can be on a vegetable tray. You can just use them any way you would use the broccoli. And the broccoli is the same here if you wanted to pull it off with your hands. If you're doing a nice vegetable tray, you could pull it off and trim off the bottom. You don't want to make, when you're making vegetable trays, you want to make sure the vegetable is small enough to fit in a person's mouth, right? You don't want to have a huge, might be a little big You might want to just cut that if you're doing a vegetable tray. Because people are usually standing up eating or sitting, and it's nice to have them small enough to be able to fit at the end of a fork and fit in your mouth. So here again, we'll chop the... Now, if the stem is thin like that, you can just chop it. But if it's thick and it's thicker like this, you want to chop that off. And you'll be able to tell if it's fresh, really nice broccoli like this is. Then you can just chop it up because that will cook. And then you can peel the fibrous part off. There we go. Okay, so I'm just gonna chop my broccoli just a little bit. So I have my broccoli, my cauliflower, and my onions ready to go. And everything else we're gonna measure as we go. So we'll go ahead and ready to get started cooking. Okay, so here we have our pot and it's heating up. And I'm using olive oil in it, so I'm gonna let my pot heat up before I put my oil in it. Because remember, hot pot oil, cold pot butter. If you're gonna use butter to cook in, you wanna start it cold, because if you put cold butter in a hot pot, it most likely might burn quickly. So we're gonna start with heating the pan and then adding a tablespoon of olive oil. Okay, we're gonna start out. We have a tablespoon of olive oil in the pan, and it's hot, and we're gonna heat it up. Gonna put our onions in. Give those a saute. There's a few little stragglers of broccoli in there, but that's okay. Then we're gonna add our spices, because I like to cook the spices in with the onions so they can bloom. So we're gonna have a half teaspoon of ground ginger. I'm going to stir that around. And then we're going to put a teaspoon of cumin. Now I like a lot of cumin in my soup. You can add less. Very flavorful. We'll add a tablespoon of garlic. So here we have a tablespoon of garlic. So we're just going to let that saute till it's soft and translucent. I'm going to turn my pot down. See, it's browning. And one thing you can do if your product starts to saute too quickly, you can bring it down a bit by adding just a little bit of water. You also can saute with just water. You don't have to have oil. You would start out with a little water and add more water as you go. It's a perfectly healthy way to cook without oil, because lots of folks like to have oil-free dishes. So you can see that it's cooking the onions and the garlic and the spice mixture. So we'll just cook that for a few minutes till it softens. Okay, so that looks good. And we're gonna simmer this so they'll continue to cook, but they've caramelized enough. Now we're gonna add our cauliflower. And we're gonna cook that for about 5 minutes. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes. Now we're gonna add our broccoli. Kind of stir that around. And we'll add our water. Now I'm adding 2 quarts. So I'm going to use better than bouillon. You can use any kind of vegetable base. You just want to follow the directions. And for this one, the directions are 1 teaspoon to 8 ounces. So I'm going to use about 1/4 cup to start, because you can always add more. You can't take it away. So less is more, because even though it's a reduced sodium product, it still has a fair amount of salt in it. And you notice I didn't put any salt and pepper in the soup yet. I'm going to do that at the end when I taste it, so I know how much it needs then. So now we're just going to let this simmer until it's cooked. Okay, we're back. So we can see that our see that I've pureed my soup. This is my immersion blender. It's like almost like a little outboard motor with a propeller at the end of it. It's got a blade that purees. And this is a really handy tool to have, because you can put it right in the pot and you're not transferring the soup to a blender if it's hot. It's much safer to use. So you want to make sure you puree it until it's very smooth. You can see here it's pretty smooth. And I will just take it out. You don't want to have any lumps in it or any type of vegetable, just kind of chunks floating around. So at this point, we're going to taste it. And I'm going to taste it for seasoning. I think there's enough salt in it. I won't add any more of that. I might add some white pepper, just a little bit. And I'm using a 2-spoon method, clean spoon every time you taste. Give it a stir. I've added the lime juice to it. It kind of brightens up the flavor. Nice, very nice. Could use just a bit more salt. Don't be afraid to salt food. You don't want to over salt it because that would be bad and it would turn the dish off. But don't be afraid to use salt because it really does enhance the dish. So I'm going to try one more time with a clean spoon. Perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to serve. I'm going to pour it in your bowl. Now we're going to serve it with some roasted pepitas, which are the pumpkin seeds. And we'll also do a drizzle of olive oil, just to give it a little more richness. And if we wanted to have a bit of garnish on the edge, we could do that as well. Typically, you want to garnish with an ingredient that's in the soup, but today we're just going to use this little sprig of garnish. So there you have it. It's a pureed soup. Now you could, if you wanted to put cream in it, you could put half and half just at the end, maybe a half a cup or so, just to what we call cream the soup. Or you could put coconut milk if you wanted to make it plant-based, because this is a plant-based dish. We made it plant-based with the olive oil and the vegetable base. So this would be a really nice vegetarian soup option. Or you could do it with chicken base and garnish it with some chunks of chicken if you'd like to do that too. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the soup.